Then we are off and running. All right. Hey, guys, welcome to the Q&A on September 30th. I'm going to go ahead and start letting some folks in here. Welcome, everybody that is joining us here. This is going to be a little bit different this week because Ryan is not going to be able to join us. So it's just going to be me here going through some things. And if you guys have any questions, go ahead and throw your questions into the chat box and I'll get to them. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here just to go. I've got a couple things on the agenda. And then I actually am going to flip things up a little bit here and talk about one of the questions that we've been getting a lot. Are questions that have been surrounding the topics of nutrition and things like that. And we haven't really put anything out regarding our, in a while we haven't put anything out regarding kind of our main thoughts on, nutrition and what the best way is for you guys to kind of follow a nutritional plan. And we've got some definite thoughts here. So I'm going to go ahead and lay those out in a little bit of a presentation style format, actually, because we did that for a group a little bit ago. Sorry, I'm a little distracted here, letting everybody in. This is where Ryan usually helps me out here. But welcome to everybody that's joining. Let's see. All right. All right, so this is the September 30th Q&A. First of all, welcome to everybody that's on. Like I said, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat box. I will go ahead and get to them as soon as possible. But just to kind of catch up on a couple of things, if you guys follow the emails, you've found that, or that I'm training for a trail run, which is a little bit out of my normal routine of training. And I've got a couple of interesting things that I have just kind of personally come across in the training for this past weekend. So my son belongs to a mountain biking club. And as you know, I'm not a huge, I don't care to run because I had to run for exercise for so long when I was a soccer player that I just kind of avoid it most of the time. And I do most of my training with the weights and resistance and things like that, and some sprint protocols, and use the bike or the rower or those kind of things. Every now and then I really don't hate running. I do sometimes find that it does help kind of clear the mind. And I've found that the trail running is much more entertaining for me, because I guess it's almost a little bit distracting because you have to pay attention so you don't fall on your face every time. So you have to watch where you're running, so you can't think about how terrible the running is, so that has actually kind of intrigued me, and I just like the challenge of it too. So I'm kind of getting into that a little bit. I like this challenge that Ryan and I are doing. It's an 8-mile trail run. I forget what the change in elevation is that it's going to be, but it's a bear. I did it last year, and it was, or 2 years ago, and it was really hard. But what I wanted to bring up was I actually was running, and I was on my way. It was a 2.5-mile trek out, 2.5 miles back. And on the way back down, I was like, man, I think I'm doing pretty well here. I'm kind of getting the hang. I'm moving pretty quick. I'm feeling pretty good. And as soon as I got distracted, I hit a rock. I rolled my ankle, and I mean, I almost went down. There was a mountain biker up ahead, so I had to pretend like it didn't hurt and that I was cool. But it really freaking hurt. But I have rolled my ankle so many times in the history of my soccer career that I kind of knew what to expect. I knew, it was going to be painful, but I could continue to walk it off. I jogged a little bit more. But at the very beginning, it's not that bad because it's not swelling up yet. As long as you keep it moving, it's not going to be that bad. But I think we talked about this on the show, or on the Q&A a little while back, the concept of icing an injury versus not icing an injury. And so I kind of used myself in this experience as a little bit of an experiment to see what it would be like if I decided not to ice, because I've always in the past at least iced at the very beginning when I have an injury like this. And so I had a feeling that I probably wouldn't get super swollen just because the last couple times I've rolled my ankle, again, because I've done so many times, I know that I've torn a couple ligaments. So those ligaments aren't there to tear anymore. So they're not going to cause that effusion and the huge swelling, but there definitely would be some swelling. So I used it as a little experiment. It was painful. And so I was tempted at times to throw the ice on simply to just kind of reduce the pain level. But I made sure that I just kept moving the ankle, much like we do in the daily motion stuff, where you're just kind of doing the circles, kind of pumping up and down, side to side, even doing little ABCs, kind of squeezing the toes and those kinds of things. And I have to say, this was just last Saturday. I have to say that it's already feeling very, like I know that I could go and run on it right now. I haven't yet run on it, but so it brings us back to that conversation of should you use ice, should you not use ice? And I finally dug out the book. If you guys can see this, it's called Iced by Gary Reinl. I had Gary on the show a while back, but this is the book, and the conversation with Gary is what really kind of got me thinking about what the purpose of icing is, and is it really effective? I'd highly recommend, if you have any interest in actually knowing the physiology of why I've kind of made this decision to steer away from icing it. I don't totally disagree with it, but it just showed me this little experiment that, it's movement in your muscles that are really going to help you get past an injury quicker than the icing protocol. So the idea here is that, your muscles are really your natural pumping station in your body. So when you have an injury, no matter what it be, ankle, wrist, hand, shoulder, your muscle, anytime you have any kind of swelling, inflammation, your muscles are really what are going to help speed that healing process along and help push that fluid, all the inflammation there. Your body has to create inflammation. That is how we heal. But in order to prevent that huge swelling, we need to have this pumping situation going on. It pushes all of that fluid into your lymphatic system, which is kind of your drainage system of the body, and gets rid of it. So simply staying active, simply staying on top of it and moving it on a regular basis. For me, I don't want to have to roll my ankle to test the ice theory again, but it seemed like it worked just as well, if not better, than when I had iced previously. So take that for what it's worth, because I know that we get a lot of questions. Should I ice it? Should I not ice it? So I just kind of wanted to address that with a personal experience that I had this last week. And then that also kind of pushed into this past week, since I wasn't able to, I'm trying to run twice a week, once typically on Tuesday, once on Saturday. But I couldn't run on Tuesday because of the ankle. So my neighbor has recently got into what's called rucking. Does anybody on the call know what rucking is? I can see a couple of you guys, so if you can shake your head or not. So rucking is basically it pretty much is, when somebody's in the military service or whatever, you have a ruck pack. And so it's basically, those are super heavy packs. So they call that rucking when you go out with your pack on. Well, now it's started to become kind of an exercise craze where guys or girls throw weights in a backpack and they just go hike, or they go run, or they do whatever. And I've seen him walking his dog with the weight pack on. And I was thinking, like, how am I going to continue my training? What's a good way for me to continue my training for this trail run? Because I don't really want to slow down on that. And so I decided I asked him if I could borrow his ruck pack. And then just when my son was at practice the other night, I just walked around the park. I walked through the park on relatively straight terrain, so I wouldn't wreck my ankle again. But then it got me thinking, like, man, that this could be a great way for people, especially I have a lot of golfers that, are trying to get ready for like a big golf trip. And they contact me like, hey, I'm getting ready to go to Scotland, or I'm getting ready to go to Ireland, or I'm going to Bandon Dunes. And I know that this is like a trip of a lifetime, but I have to walk the golf course. And I don't know if I can walk that long. And so I threw this pack on. And as I was walking, I was like, man, this would be a great way to train your legs with some weight to make it easier when you do go out on the golf course. And no matter whether you're hoofing your bag or not, but I mean, how many times have you gotten tired at the end of a round because either you're walking or, you know, it's carts on path and you got to go, you know, trek back and forth to your cart or not. And I mean, a lot of the population that I see here in the gym are guys in their 50s, 60s, and that's a big struggle. And one of my key philosophies is the stronger that we get your legs, the better off you're going to be overall. And that's why we do so many of the leg exercises in all of our workouts. But just that little thing has such a great carryover to that portion of the game, which can be very taxing. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see me talking a little bit more about some rucking in my experience and things like that. I did order a ruck weight. It's like a rectangle. It's 25 pounds that I'm going to start throwing in my backpack, and every now and then, you know, try that out just again as another way to kind of mix up the training a little bit. So it's not always just the same exercises in the gym, but you know, there's something to be said about looking for different ways to mix up your training a little bit. So for me, you know, sometimes the gym ends up getting a little bit boring. So this is kind of a new way, like, oh man, something different little challenge. And you know, sometimes you just got to kind of light that fire a little bit on new ways to get yourself excited to stay on track. Anybody have any questions before we go? We're gonna talk about some nutritional stuff today. So I've got a little bit of a presentation here if I can figure out how to share my screen. But if you guys have any questions, like I said, just throw them in the chat box. Marina, I know that you sent a message via the app that really kind of got me thinking about some of this nutritional stuff. So we'll talk about that. But just before I jump in, just want to see if anybody has anything right out of the gate here. I see Kevin typing. Let's see. Tight spinal muscles. Any suggestions for tight spinal muscles to loosen them up? So do you mean like straight up and down the spine? Like, and here, there you go.
More like upper area, like as far as you can reach down doing this. I mean, it's like that whole area just gets tight. And I don't know if it's just from overworking, just taking way too many swings, but like I can feel it before I even start, you know, right when I'm warming up. And it's like, you know, even doing the daily motion kind of exercises, I don't know if there's something on top of that to do just to kind of keep that area loose.
Yeah, kind of that mid shoulder blade area, upper back kind of area type stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things to do is, you know, those big, like long, stretchy rubber bands, super flex bands or whatever they are. I'd love to have one of those, like a lighter one, and just do some of those like pull aparts. And it's almost counterintuitive because that's really going to like start squeezing those muscles, and you're going to be working those muscles as you're squeezing backwards. But when you do that, you're kind of also going to create a little bit of a relaxed tension in them too. So once you do those squeezes, it's almost like, you can kind of like relax a little bit, but they're also right before you're getting ready to play, it's kind of turning them on a little bit. It's that whole priming philosophy that we talk about where you're kind of getting those muscles ready to respond. But sometimes we're so like tensed up, and a lot of it comes, you know, up into the shoulder blades. And then that kind of refers down into that middle shoulder blade area. So if we can kind of like drop those shoulders down and pull that band apart, and I would do it, you know, start palms down, and I do like 15 or 20 of them, go palms up, which will be a little bit harder. Do about 15 to 20 of those. And then one of my favorite, and I might even, we're kind of maybe going to revamp the daily motion a little bit. We'll keep all the same stuff, but I almost want to throw some extra ones in there for whenever you have time. One of my favorites, and I got this from Brian Bradley with Egoscue, is standing up nice and tall, turn your toes in about, you know, 10 to 15 degrees. I'll kind of stand up here and do it. You can't see my toes, obviously, but nice and tall, toes are turned in just a little bit, kind of squeeze the glutes, and it just kind of naturally pops you up into a good position here. And then put your first knuckle right on your temple, and then try to squeeze and touch your elbows all the way together. And You can do them. Yeah, go ahead and do them right now, guys. Feel free to standing up is even better. Touching them back and forth, and then try to get them all the way back out. And as you do that, you're going to feel those shoulder blades really kind of opening up and those muscles kind of stretching out a little bit. So real tall. And I would do 20 to 30 of them. That's kind of what Brian recommended. You don't have to go slow. You can actually do them kind of fast.
Okay.
Just kind of back and forth. And I think you'll find that that's, I mean, even if you're sitting at a desk throughout the day, standing up and doing that a couple of times a day would be a great thing to do, just to kind of get rid of some of the tension back there.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Any other questions before we jump into this pseudo presentation? All right. So let me try to share my screen here. Let's see. Of course, it's all right. Little technical difficulties here, guys. Oh, hold on. Again, this is why Ryan is normally here. Here we go. Okay. Can you guys see this nutritional strategies slide? Okay. Let's see if we can get it to play. Nope. Oh, geez. All right. I know I've done this before. Here we go. Okay. So a while back, we did a small online group, and it was a 12-week program. And we had people come in. It was a pretty expensive deal, but it was a very personal kind of intimate group of guys where we had a Facebook group together. They were doing certain workouts that were very much like the Golf Body Blueprint, kind of that same formula, but we really touched on getting their nutrition in order. And so this is one of the presentations that I kind of did for them. And it gives you a little bit of almost like a roadmap of what we did with them, what we focused on first and foremost, and kind of our philosophies on nutrition. And so I just kind of wanted to run through these. We called it the RFG. So it stood for Real Fit Golf. And so you're going to see RFG in here a little bit, but I'm going to just kind of walk through each of these, and then we'll talk about a couple other just little strategies that we have. Let me see if I can kind of pull up. I kind of lost you guys. There we go. Can you guys still see the Google Sheet? Okay. All right. So the first thing, now I have to preface this with saying that everything nutritionally really depends on what your goal is. Most of the guys that were in this group were kind of, I think, our typical audience, where, they were kind of between the probably 35 to 60 range. But all of them were looking to just kind of generally get into better shape. Some of them were looking to lose 15, 20 pounds, which over the course of 12 weeks, those guys did hit their goals. And we try to keep it as simple as possible. I know that there's 10 things here, but we didn't hammer all 10 of these. We just kind of started them very simply, which you're going to see. But I just want to highlight these different pieces and why they're so important. So the first one is just, we said, no matter what you're doing right now, start out with just going to 2 to 3 meals a day. And number one is going to kind of play into number 5 too. So 2 to 3 meals a day meant you had to kind of plan out what you were going to eat, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or however you ended up scheduling that meal. That some of the guys, they would do their first meal at lunchtime. Some would do early morning breakfast. Didn't matter. We have been told that eating in small, frequent portions is a way to kind of keep our furnace burning throughout the whole day. I find that if somebody's struggling with what they're eating, how much they're eating, it makes a lot more sense to just start with 2 to 3 meals a day, because then you have to kind of plan things out a little bit, and you're going to be less likely to kind of go crazy on some of the snacking and some of the other junk that we tend to eat. So 2 to 3 meals a day was one of our staples. We went with, we encourage people to have protein at every single meal. And that could be fish, chicken, beef. If you're on a plant-based diet, whatever your sources of protein are that you like to eat, we make sure that we have protein at every single meal. Now, we didn't get very specific at first with these guys as far as how much protein. We just said, make sure that you have some sort of protein at every meal. So every time you have a plate in front of you, which is important, to take your time, don't stand at the counter and eat your meal. Get a plate, get a bowl, whatever it is, put it on the plate, because there's something about actually sitting down and taking your time to eat that also makes a big difference of being a little bit more intentional of what's going into your body. So protein every time you sat down with your plate. I'll get into the specifics in a little bit here of the protein. Veggies at every meal is probably my favorite thing to add in. I'm not huge. I don't like to come in and say, like, you got to start going crazy and cutting everything out. But I do like to tell people, add veggies to every meal. And yes, that includes breakfast if you're eating breakfast, which is usually when I get kind of that crooked look. My children have known nothing but veggies at every meal since the day they were born. So every morning they have either, leftover broccoli, they have cucumbers, they have carrots, they have whatever. They just see it as normal until they go to somebody else's house and eat a big bowl of cereal. But veggies in the morning, veggies at lunch, veggies at dinner. There's no rule written down that says that you can't have a healthy vegetable at breakfast. It's just kind of not been what we tend to do in our society. But veggies at every meal is a huge, huge piece. And if you think about it, it's just getting your nutrition every time that you have an opportunity to fuel your body. So for me, that makes a lot of sense. Number 4, we like to say that you have to earn your carbs. And not that carbs are a bad thing. Vegetables are all carbs. So I'm actually not talking about vegetables in this sense, because you could eat vegetables till the cows come home, as far as I'm concerned. When I talk about earning your carbs here, we're talking about kind of the starchy carbs. That could be pasta, that could be breads, that could be any of those kind of things, crackers, that type of stuff. We try to stick with, kind of the more natural, less processed stuff. So, even rices and things like that. But really, if you're looking to lean out, if fat loss is a goal of yours, I've found that one of the quickest and easiest ways to really start to see changes in the scale is to start to eliminate some of those starchy carbs. So when we say you have to earn them, that means that we tell ourselves the only time you can add a little bit of pasta or a little bit of rice or something like that to your meals is after you have done your workout. So think of that as earning it. You put in the time, you put in the effort, you drained your glycogen storage, you worked really hard. Yeah, I earned having that side of whatever it is. We're not talking about a bowl of fettuccine Alfredo. We're talking about a side of some sort of, little pasta or rice or something like that. Number 5 kind of goes along with the first one. Like I said, no snacking. But the reason we put this in there is snacking is one of the areas where people, they could eat really well during their meals, and then they just kind of lose it with the snacking. And I personally have found that for myself and most of the guys that we and girls that we've come into contact with here through our training, is that when you make that decision to say that I can't do it, or I shouldn't say can't, that you're not doing it. Once you make that decision, I find that it's way easier. If there's something in the cabinet, but I know, if there's crackers or chips or whatever, but I know that in between meals, there's like, I'm just not doing it mentally. I've taken it off the table. If you say, oh, well, I'm going to just have a small little handful of this, you're going to find yourself grazing. You're going to find yourself in situations where, oh, a little bit won't hurt me, or oh, it was just a couple of chips or whatever that might be. When you say no, that you're just not doing it, it's 100% off the table. And even though it sounds like it would be harder, having that decision made actually will make it easier for you. No sugary drinks. Number 6, soda or pop or Coke, whatever you like to call it, depending on what part of the nation or world you are in. Those are just wasted calories. And same would go for alcohol. We like to treat alcohol a little bit differently here at 18 Strong because we know our audience. But, if you can control those things throughout the day, not having, the sugary teas or Gatorades or, whatever the drinks are, that's going to eliminate a lot of those useless calories. It's going to help you hydrate yourself, which I don't really have on this sheet, but hydration obviously is a very big one, to make sure that your body is moving and processing everything well, and just feeling good. And it helps with all the other processes of the body. So we say stick to only water, coffee, and tea. Ideally, black coffee, because adding in the creamers or whatever, obviously all that stuff kind of plays into it. Number 7, whole foods. The less processed, the better. And I know that I'm not, producing any rocket science material here. This is all stuff that you've heard before. But the fruits and veggies, good meats, the stuff that doesn't come in a bag, the stuff that isn't processed, the stuff that doesn't have, chemically taste. You look at an ingredients list and it's, 30 lines and you can't pronounce half of the stuff. I mean, that's when you just have to start kind of using your common sense and looking and seeing like, is this stuff that I really want to put in my body? I don't even know what this word is. Is it something that I would feed my kids? So all of those things really play into, the more natural the food is, obviously, the better off your body's going to be able to handle it. And we literally are what we eat. I mean, that is what keeps our body moving. That's what keeps our body growing. That's what helps our muscles. I mean, it is literally the fuel. So if you're putting, pardon my French, if you're putting shitty fuel in your body, what does that say about what results you expect to get? Number 8 is calorie tracking. We only utilize calorie tracking when these guys had started and done all of the things above and still weren't necessarily hitting the goals that they wanted to. So when we talk about calorie tracking, really, we try to keep it as simple as possible. If you're looking to lose weight, we would say rule of thumb, and I go by pounds, your body weight times 10 to 12. If you're looking to lose weight, we would start with 12. And then if we have to start scaling back by a couple hundred calories, we would start to do that. If you're looking to pretty much maintain the same body weight, maybe kind of lose a little bit of fat, increase a little bit of muscle mass, we're going to stay kind of in that 12 to 14 range, body weight times 12 to 14. And then if you're looking to increase mass, we would go to kind of that 14 to 16 range. So if you're the Bryson DeChambeaus, Bryson probably went up to like body weight times 20, something like that. He kind of went all in. But those are just kind of general rules of thumb. And like I said, we only went there. Calories are the king of all of it, calories in, calories out. That's a very easy and generalized way to say it. It's not the whole story, but that really is kind of the main thing. But I find that people are intimidated when it comes to saying you have to start tracking your calories. And so we go with a little bit more habit-based approach than jumping straight into the calorie game. Hang on one second. So that's kind of where we started. And then we always try to tell people, number 9, live by the 80-20 rule. Now, there are times where you will hear me talk about kind of going a little extreme with my diet, or encouraging people to go a little extreme with their diet, or encouraging them to challenge themselves. But for the most part, living that kind of 80-20 lifestyle is really what I do on a pretty regular basis. It's what we preach to our crew on a regular basis, because if you're never giving yourself a break, you're going to go crazy, and then you're going to quit. And then that's where the sustainability comes in, is not being able to continue to do the things over and over and over again, and then throwing your hands in the air, giving up, and then going back to your old habits. And then lastly, number 10, we kind of mentioned it before, and this really goes with the 2 to 3 meals piece, is that preparation is really the key to this whole thing. You know, when you start to think a day ahead, 2 days ahead, 3 days ahead of, okay, I'm eating 2 to 3 meals. What am I going to eat? And I'm going to give you a couple suggestions here in just a minute. But when you start to think ahead, it really becomes a lot easier. I know that it can seem very daunting when you're first kind of embarking on any kind of a journey like this, but when you start to think ahead and you start to prepare a little bit, it actually makes your life a whole lot easier, because you either can prepare. Many times on the weekend, I'll cook a bunch of food and then just kind of have it and know that I can dole it out throughout the week. My wife is an incredible cook, so I'm very fortunate with that, and she takes care of me pretty good. So most of the time, and she's a very, very healthy eater. But it's all about the preparation. Sometimes I'm super impressed with how prepared she is, and I probably wouldn't be in as good of health if it wasn't for her. So kudos to my wife. Okay, so what we did for these guys is the first 4 weeks, we told them, these are your non-negotiable things. I don't care about the rest of them. Kind of have the rest of it in the back of your head, but start out with these 3 things. Only eat 2 to 3 meals a day, eliminate the snacking, and stay away from the sugary drinks. Now, for some of the guys, this was super easy. For some of the guys, it was extremely hard. You know, some of them were used to drinking soda several times a day. Most of them were used to snacking throughout the day. And we did this, just so you guys know, this program went on. We started it, and then I want to say 2 weeks into it is when the world shut down. And so it was at a really, really tough time when everybody's kind of freaking out. Everybody's kind of locked in their house. And I did this with them. Everything that we were doing, I went through the full 12 weeks and did it exactly the way that they were doing it too, which really was a blessing for me, because, you know, it was a really easy time to, first of all, it was a tough time as far as the gym was concerned, because kind of all client sessions and everything were wiped out. It would have been a really easy time to get off a healthy eating diet. Would have been a really easy time to start drinking heavily, you know, being at home. And I think much of the world ended up kind of going in that direction. And so the guys in this group, and myself personally, we kind of took this as a bit of a challenge, as, hey, let's not go in the same direction that everybody else is. And let's hit it really hard right now so we can be better prepared. And that's a whole different conversation about keeping your body healthy to protect you from what's going on in the world. So that's what we did the first 4 weeks, and we really hammered that home. Now, some of the guys dug in a little bit deeper, and they really utilized some of the other points that we just went through. But this was the stuff that we said, these are your non-negotiables that we want you to report in on these for the first 4 weeks. And we actually had a little tracking sheet that, you know, they kind of checked off, and they turned in at the end of the week and said, yes, you know, I was 100% complete on only my 2 to 3 meals, my no snacking, my no sugary drinks. And then we also had some workout stuff tied into that as well. So then for the next 5 to 8 weeks, we then really hammered home, you got to get your protein in, and you got to get your veggies in at every meal. And it's interesting because by the end of the 4th week, most of these guys had already started to adopt this into their program. And so again, this wasn't that hard to get them to do. And then once we started to get them through all 5 of these things and they didn't see that things were moving as quickly as they wanted to, that's when we then started to look at their calories. And we would pull up something like MyFitnessPal or the Lose It app or one of those other resources. And then they were able to track their calories. We kind of showed them how to track their calories. Let me kind of open this up a little bit so I can see more of you guys here. Have any of you tracked your calories before on like an app or anything like that? Is anybody kind of a little leery about tracking their calories? Just because it seems like it's a daunting thing to do. Because I was always that way. I always hated that. I see the high five from Matt. Yeah, like it was always one of those things where I was like, man, that just seems like such a pain in the ass to do. And I just don't want to do it. But it wasn't until I tracked my calories, even for a week, or really like even just a couple of days, that first of all, I realized how easy it is. And that it doesn't take that much time. Once you have the app, you can literally, you can scan, not to use eat a book, but you could scan the little barcode and it pulls up, what the calories are, what the fats are, what the carbs are, all of that stuff. And then it's really easy to just kind of put it in. And so then we taught those guys, okay, here's your caloric intake that we're looking for you to have, and try to get to that number. Try to not be super low below that number, but definitely let's not go above that number. And then we also started to talk about the protein intake, which protein wise, we wanted them to be around 30% to 40% of their calorie intake. For most people, we recommend somewhere between the 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per body weight in pounds. And for a lot of people, that sounds like a lot of protein. My neighbor, we talked about him last week, I believe, same guy that kind of introduced me to the rucking stuff. He's doing that 75 hard challenge. And that was the thing that he was really struggling with. It was the first time he'd ever tracked his calories, and he was doing a good job with that, but he wasn't really seeing the results. And then he was only getting about 10% of his calories from protein. And so we had him, I just encouraged him to bump that up. I'm not working directly with him, but encourage him to bump that up to about 30%. And he's doing phenomenal. I just saw him last night. We went to the baseball game. I kind of taunted him with the beer that I had that he can't drink. But he's doing great. He looks phenomenal. And his energy levels are on track. So that's what we kind of did with our guys too. Like we got them used to tracking calories if they needed to. Everybody in the group didn't have to do that. And then we got their protein kind of dialed in. And anytime that I'm on a pretty strict nutrition regimen, those are really the 2 big things that I focus on if I'm tracking anything. Calories and protein. But once you track your calories for a little while, you kind of understand calorically what you're taking in. So I really don't track my calories on a regular basis unless I know that I really have to kind of dial some things in. But after you do it a couple of times, you start to intuitively know kind of what you're doing there. Okay. So just a couple suggestions is when you're planning out your meals, it's really helpful to have just a handful of go-tos that you know are staples. You already know, and this is great for the tracking because you know what the caloric intake is. In those apps, you can actually set it up where, even if you have a recipe or something like that, you can then just add it every day. So you know exactly what the protein is, what the calories are. So for me, some of the things that I went with were some of those bagged salads. I go to Aldi, or here we have Dierbergs and Schnucks, but whatever grocery store you go to, Trader Joe's, they've all got these bagged salads, different flavors. And I still do that. I think I probably have one in the fridge over there. Bagged salad, I would throw some extra spinach in it, and I would either do 2 cans of tuna or cut up a chicken breast or a can of chicken, whatever it is. But having those staple meals were kind of a lifesaver because, again, it takes the thinking out of it. It makes your prep that much easier. Crock pot chicken is awesome. Roasting and baking chicken, roasting vegetables is super easy. So it's just find a couple things that you like. A good cookbook is the Whole30 cookbook, if any of you guys are familiar with that program. And then just always have a bunch of vegetables on hand. We roast just about any vegetable under the sun: broccoli, cauliflower, peppers, cabbage, all of those things. But to have those staples, I forget, it was probably when I was talking to my buddy Tony, and we were having a conversation about the most successful people do the boring stuff consistently. So I'm a guy that I could eat the same thing every single day for a long, long time. Case in point, I've been eating these bagged salads for about 2 years now, almost every day for lunch with some chicken or tuna fish or whatever meat we have at home. So when you can wrap your head around just doing some of the monotonous things or having the same thing repetitively, maybe you have a rotation of these different meals. That's the easiest way to take a lot of the thinking out of it. It's the easiest way to take a lot of the temptation out of it. And so that was a huge suggestion and a big win for a lot of our guys. They all ended up on the bagged salad diet pretty much. Okay. Regarding the nutrition strategies here, I mentioned MyFitnessPal. So tracking your calories, obviously it gets you dialed in, tracking your calories, tracking your protein. And I think it really just gives you a better awareness of how much food you're eating. Some people are eating way too little food. Some people are eating way too much food. But I definitely found that most people are eating too little of protein, or the things that they think have protein in them don't have as much in it as they thought. And that's where, some of the supplements can come in, like using a post-workout shake to get those extra protein grams, or things like that. The second is for those that are really averse to the calorie counting, is using, there's a company called Precision Nutrition, which is one of my favorite nutritional sites to follow. Very science-based. They put out great information. But they, hold on, I got to plug in my computer. But they are very big on kind of the intuitive eating, and rather than having to track your calories all the time, they give you guides regarding, looking this way. You can look at a plate, and based on like your hand size, they give you recommendations of, I think like your protein is supposed to be the size of your palm. The veggies on your plate are supposed to be like the size of your whole hand. The carbs, like rice or pasta or whatever, if it's a post-workout meal, is supposed to be like the size of maybe your fist, and then like the fats, the size of your thumb, something like that. But if you go to precisionnutrition.com, you can find those resources available, and they are phenomenal. It's a very convenient, like I said, convenient and intuitive way to look at what you're eating. It's also a very long-term strategy. So you can do it when you're in real life. So you're not pulling out your calculator and, tallying things up at that restaurant. Okay. So like I said, with our guys, we told them, well, this actually didn't necessarily apply to them because they were on this 100% the whole time. But one strategy that has worked for me when I'm not in, kind of straight on mode, is to think about my weekdays, Monday through Friday, as being kind of 100% on my quote unquote diet, which I don't like to use. But that way, all of, Monday through Friday, most of us are working, we have jobs. It's easier to just plan out your meals, have it there, eat your lunch, come home, eat your dinner, whatever. And then at the end of the week, think of it as kind of treating yourself to a bit of a reward, being successful with your week. So if you've earned it, then you can kind of reward yourself with, maybe letting loose a little bit, that 80-20 rule again. Now, one of our favorite rules here is don't be stupid. Don't go crazy. Don't go out and binge and drink 12 beers and eat a whole pizza and then come home and get ice cream. And that's where, that whole alcohol piece is a big one. I know we joke about it a lot We talk about beer a lot here because we're St. Louis boys. Budweiser was born here, and we do love to have a good time. But we say that alcohol is like the gateway drug to bad eating, to bad decisions, right? So when you have 1 or 2 or 3 drinks, it's really easy to start letting your guard down. And so we address it a little bit differently because obviously we know that alcohol can be a big part of people's golf games. It cannot be a big part of people's golf games. Just depends on who you are and what your style is. But we have found that, you know, being very cognizant of how much alcohol you're drinking really lets your guard down. I personally, if I have 2, 3 beers, it's like, oh, that bag of chips is calling my name, and, you know, big deal. You know, you kind of let the guard down. So I like to call it like morning Jeff versus late night Jeff. Late night Jeff doesn't make good decisions. Morning Jeff is like as sharp as they come, right? So just know that's a big piece. And so we addressed that with a lot of our guys. Most of the guys ended up just giving up alcohol for the entire 12 weeks that they were in the RFG, which obviously you can imagine really contributed to their weight loss. And I think some of the guys really are utilizing alcohol way less than they were prior to, which was pretty cool to see. Okay, let me kind of stop my screen sharing here and see if anybody has any questions regarding any of that. I know I threw a lot of information out to you guys there, but thought that might be a little bit helpful to see or to hear, right? Because we've gotten a lot of those calls. Any questions, Maureen? I do want to address a couple of the specific questions that you had sent in your message, but anybody got anything? Yeah, go ahead, Kev.
So for me, it's kind of the opposite of trying to put weight on.
Yep.
Obviously, I'd rather do that in a healthy way. So I know kind of the mindset's not to reverse everything you said and go for the snacks and the late night stuff. You know, I know you mentioned the formula for calorie counting I think you said 14 to 16 your body weight. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other kind of tips for that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of more, a lot of times I'm more in your camp, Kevin, as far as, you know, trying to put on a little bit of good weight. And so when I was doing this, I would definitely utilize a post-workout shake to make sure that I got my protein in. And then I typically did 2 big meals that really would have been like the bulk of my main eating. And then at night, I would do either what I call a super shake. And Precision Nutrition talks about this. They've got a super shake guide. And that would be like I would blend it up. It would be some protein powder, some Greek yogurt, some kind of nut butter, spinach, berries. And it ended up being, you know, probably a good 700 calories or something like that. And that was just a way for me to increase my calories, but know exactly what I was putting in there. So, you know, the whole bodybuilding world, you know, for many years and years and years, it was just like, eat as much as you possibly can, go, you know, and some of those guys had to eat, you know, like 5,000 calories or whatever it is. And so it's almost impossible to do that completely healthily. But yeah, I found it was a struggle to just get it in my regular meals. So adding in one of those super shakes, and that's really what I will do with some of my high school guys that come in, because they're all, you know, string beans and they're all looking to put on weight. And so if they don't have any kind of a nut allergy, I always throw in some almond butter, peanut butter, whatever that might be, the protein powder, the Greek yogurt, and just kind of give them some really dense calories that will help reach that caloric goal, but also try to get that protein goal as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. All right. Anybody else got a question? All right. So Marina, I'm going to address, you mentioned that you started adding in some MCT oil is it in the mornings, and is it only on the days that you play?
Yes, I put about a teaspoon in my coffee every morning. They recommend that you can use more to get more energy and have more benefits, but I'm just a bit wary about the oil and if I put on more weight, if I put more. But I do I do find that I mentally perform better, maybe, whether it's just something that I think, that the oil is doing, but I do believe in the science behind it.
Are you intermittent fasting, or are you eating breakfast on those days, or?
Yeah, I eat breakfast every morning. I eat a lot of fruit, and I do have a bowl of cereal with Greek yogurt, and I eat a lot of veggies on the course, and I do try to eat very healthily. I don't do any snacking apart from on the course. That's difficult, I think, because I don't do snacking as such, but I do the banana, or I do sometimes I'll have a whole meal wrap with some chicken or salad, this sort of thing. So 2 to 3 meals a day is a bit difficult when I have a wrap on the, let's say, on the fifth hole and or the 10th hole and the 15th hole, just to keep my energy levels level, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I would say that on those days that you're playing and competing, those would be kind of special situations. Course, kind of snacks and things. I'm a big fan of, and I had mentioned this to you um, in the response back, doing some sort of nuts, maybe some dried fruits, um, even a banana, apple, those kinds of things, beef jerky, all of those things that don't have the starchy carbs to them. That's usually kind of my go-to, because I just feel like having the breads, even the wraps, that carbohydrate and that starchy carbs can tend to kind of give you that little bit of a spike and lowering. And when we're out on the golf course, it's not like we're competing in, like a soccer game or an endurance race or something like that, where we're really kind of like burning off all those glycogen stores and things like that. So I like the idea of the oil because I agree that mentally that those fats can help kind of sustain you as far as keeping you from getting hungry. They can also keep you a little bit sharper. And this is what I mentioned to you in the message back, but just for everybody else on the call, if you do feel like just adding that teaspoon of oil is impacting, weight gain, I would say that on those days, let's just be a little more cognizant of, maybe taking out some calories elsewhere. I would suggest to you, maybe even on those days, and you could test this out. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. I work very well on very low carbs. So on a day like that, I might not eat the cereal that you mentioned, the fruits, the veggies, some protein, maybe the spoonful of oil, and that would probably that would do me just fine. And then maybe during the round, have some of those other things that are, more protein and fat based. And then maybe the dried fruits, those will give you a little bit of sugars and a little bit of the carbs there. But if you're worried about that causing some weight gain, I would just say maybe on those days, try to snip something else out of the diet that might be about the same caloric intake. But I would probably start with maybe just dampening down the cereal portion, see how that feels. If you feel like, oh man, that really sucked my energy out, then maybe you're somebody that needs to have a little bit of that carbs in the morning to get you going. But I'd give that a shot.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else, guys? We've got a couple more minutes before the 3 o'clock hour here on my end. Nothing. All right. Well, one last thought that I'm going to leave you with, and this is just, I know everybody's probably tired of hearing me talk about my Ryder Cup from a couple weeks ago, but we sent this out in the email, really I think it was the day before I went down there, and I wrote a little kind of a pep talk speech to my teammates because I was the captain of the team, having some fun with my buddies from college. But I put down, like, hey, I've had a chance to talk with some pretty cool people in the world of golf. And so these are kind of 8 things that I would recommend you guys kind of pay attention to over the weekend so we can destroy the other team. and some of them were funny. Some of them were legitimately things that I really tried to think about myself and thought that would help guys. But one of them, and this is just what I'll leave you with, I had a chance to talk to two of my favorite clients. One being Jim Holtgreave, who was the very first U.S. mid-amateur champion here in the United States back in 1981. He's been a Walker Cup captain twice. He was a Walker Cup captain for Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, Harris English, Russell Henley, all, 2011 and 2013. One of my favorite people on the planet. And then another longtime client of mine, whose name is Andy Frost, and he's been the club champ of Belle Reve Country Club, which is where the PGA Championship was back in 2018. He's been the club champ, I think, 11 times. So I asked both of them, like, what's one piece of advice, knowing that I'm getting ready to dole this out to a bunch of knuckleheads that I play with from college, right? Some of them very good golfers, though. Handicaps range from a 1 to as high as it goes. So knowing that there's this range of people, what would you say? And both of them kind of gave the same answer in a little bit different way. Andy's was a little more colorful, but Jim said, basically never give up. And it sounds so simple, but he said, no matter what situation you're in, you always have a chance to win. You always have a chance for that guy hitting the ball in the water, for your opponent to, make a bad swing, shank the ball, put it in the woods. So no matter where you are, no matter whether you're down 3 holes, just never give up, because there's always an opportunity. Andy had just been on a trip recently playing in Ryder Cup, and his advice, same basic advice, is never underestimate your opponent's ability to F it all up. And I was like, that's so perfect. He said, I was just on a Ryder Cup, and one of his buddies was playing in a match against somebody else, and it was a par 5. And his buddy, who also is a client of mine, he won a hole with a 9 because the other guy got a 10. And so they both just said, never underestimate the ability for you to pull through. Andy said it a little differently, but that goes for everything that we talk about here. So it's not just about the golf course. It's not just about the shots that you're hitting. It's not just about going and playing your Ryder Cup. It's about, as you guys probably know, my philosophies here are a lot bigger than just playing golf. And it's about us all getting better, us all becoming better versions of ourselves. So no matter where you are right now, and a couple of guys that were in that RFG group, they were in that mentality of, the one guy in particular, his name was Rick, 60 years old. He was a radiologist out in California. So he's, when COVID hit, he at first said, hey guys, I'm going to have to bail out of this. I'm too busy. He was in a place where he wasn't happy with his golf game. He wasn't happy with his physical abilities. And we just had a very frank conversation. I said, Rick, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? And he's like, you're right. And so all of a sudden the light turned on in this guy, and he, couldn't get to the gym. He did most of his exercises on his piano bench. But he did every single freaking thing that we talked about. And he initially thought, like, I'm too old for this. I'm not going to make progress. He ended up going from not walking the golf course in the last 20 years to walking 36 holes and shooting the greatest round of his life in less than 12 weeks. And it just shows, like, never give up. Right. So I'm going to leave you guys with that today. And hopefully you guys can take that out and spread the word and show them that the 18 strong crew will never give up. How about that? All right, guys, have a good one. We'll talk to you soon. Stay strong.